take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
I'm a human being, god damn it! My life has value! It's time to ask yourself what you believe.
Mass murder, torture, perjury, embezzlement, fraud, deception, treason. These are just a few of your many crimes against humanity. You will not win this war, for you are fighting the very essence of humanity.
Hi, welcome to Truth or Talk. I'm April Bowden.
I'm Virstyne Henry.
Please visit our website at truthertalk.com. We got all kinds of stuff going on over there. And, so please check it out. So on today's show, we're going to be talking about science as a religion and kind of describing what we mean by that. And that might be offensive to some people because science is not really a religion, but what is being kind of
paraded.
We think paraded, exactly, perfect word, paraded as science these days is actually based on, is actually a religious belief. It's a faith-based system. It's not based on actual science. So we hope that people can kind of get that, distinguish the difference, because, some people can't, and we've both gotten into it with people who have gotten mad at us for suggesting, who have denied the gods of science in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, they call us witches, basically.
Exactly. They try and burn the state.
How many love letters do you think we're going to get for this episode? Maybe we'll get...
I don't know. I mean, I hope people can kind of get it. We're going to have our friend Liam Sheff on in the next segment. And Liam he authored a book called The Official Stories, and it gets into, each chapter talks about a different science myth, from vaccination to the HIV testing, to 9/11 to Darwin, et cetera, et cetera. So we thought it would be good to bring him on. He's really good at describing this and comparing it to Old Testament religion, basically what is going on today in the modern, our sophisticated world, but it's really, we're continuing these religious sacrifices and destroying people's lives and their health through medical experimentation and things in the name of science. And, we'll try to get into as much as we can, some of the things that have been done in the name of science as far as like medical experiments and things of that nature, because there's quite a few, and hopefully just to knock, get some sense into people about what is true and what isn't, because I mean, people will give you a hard time for even questioning, Jonas Salk, or even questioning Robert Gallo, who invented HIV. And I say he invented it. Most people in the truth movement think that HIV was a federally funded government experiment that went awry, or that it was deliberately put into the population in order to depopulate. That it's an actual virus that was deliberately put into the population to depopulate. But that's not true. That's actually, I mean, you can look into the history of it and look into how HIV is tested and stuff. There isn't actually a virus that exists. So they are. I mean, it is used for depopulation. I would agree with that part, but it's not a virus. But go ahead.
We need to do a show on this, because I'm also thinking people that are listening that have HIV or might have somebody that they love that has died of AIDS might be offended and might cut off, shut off, and we don't want to come out across as being callous or negligent. So if you read Liam's book, his chapter on the Scarlet Letter is a really good introduction into why we're saying what we're saying, and then you can look at the references and you can go deeper into that. But I also think that should be on the list too. We need to have a show where we talk about that, because that might sound really crazy and just like I said, callous to people that are like, well, I have HIV, or my cousin, my father, my boyfriend, or my neighbor, or whatever, had AIDS, or anyway, it's a deeper, it's a subject that needs more attention.
Right.
And more explanation. So If you can look into it before we do the show on it, and even after we do the show on it, please do. And know that our intentions are good, and we're not trying to, call people dumb or, just neglect them for saying something like that.
Yeah, no, we just want to point out what we're trying to get to is the truth. We're not trying to, we're not trying to say that people who think that HIV is a conspiracy or anything like that, because most of our listeners are truthers, and so they'll kind of believe in that there is some sort of government, cover-up about HIV. I think that won't be a hard sell for anybody, from the majority of our listeners, but to actually say that the virus itself, or what they're claiming that they can detect on these tests, is a virus, it's really not. And most virus tests are done this way. They're not actually detecting what a living thing. What they're finding is proteins.
Yeah.
You have a high level of certain amount of proteins, but you can have those high levels of certain amount of proteins for any number of reasons, including being, and I'm not joking when I say this, being a dog, a cat, a mouse, a milkmaid. Mm-hmm. If you milk a cow or a goat, they have a certain protein in the milk that you can get into your skin, because you put it on your hands, and even when you wash it off, you absorb it. It is absorbed into your skin, that will cause you to have an HIV positive test. You can also test positive for being pregnant, or having the flu, or having a flu vaccine. Any number of these things will cause you to get these levels of proteins that they are detecting in this test. So if you look at the, there's a couple good documentaries about it. Gary Knoll did a documentary, Deconstructing the Myth of AIDS, and also one that Liam appears in, The House of Numbers, which was done by Brent Leung, who we'd like to get on the show, but he's hard to get in touch with. But it's you can look into it that way. So there's, we're not trying to say that there isn't a conspiracy or that there wasn't a eugenics plot, because there clearly is, but it's just not necessarily. Don't be so afraid of viruses all the time. They're not. A lot of these things, I think, are. They're not really manufactured diseases. They're just manufactured in the mind. So to create fear and panic. But they don't really. It's like a monster in the closet. It's not really there. Yeah.
Well, once you know this, and this is something that you would have to go and do the research for yourself. We always tell people, I'm always open. I'm more suspicious of people that say, listen to what I say, and if you question it, then you're an idiot. As we say the opposite. We're going to say what we think, but go please do your own research, because the only way that you can really have a conviction or a true understanding of this is if you really read it and research yourself and compare it to your life experiences.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to take a short break because we want to bring Liam on really
right away. We can't take it anymore.
We can't wait. We can't take it
anymore. Bring in the green room right now.
So please stay with us, and we're going to be right back. Thanks for listening to Truth or Talk. We'll be right back with our friend Liam Sheff.
Hello, thanks for having me on your radio. Even though we're not from a famous rock and roll band, if we were, even though we sound a little like we are, we definitely wear a Conspiracy Realist t-shirt, because they're gear, aren't they? Oh yeah, they're really gear. I want to write a song about them. Conspiracy Realist t-shirts at truthertees.com. I gotta think of the middle eight. Shop.truthertees.com. What does that mean? It's the internet. What's that? I don't know. It's a net. It's between things. Shop.truthertees.com. What's that? It's where you get Conspiracy Realist t-shirts. Oh, gear.
Hey, welcome back to Truth or Talk. On today's show, as we said in the introduction, we're talking to our friend Liam Sheff, Liam Skeef, the Conspiracy Realist himself, the inspiration for our t-shirts available at our website, truthertalk.com. He's also the author of Official Stories, which we talk about all the time. That's also available at our website. And working on a bunch of different things, which we'll get him to talk about in just a minute. So please welcome to the show, Liam Sheff. Hey, Liam.
Hey, Hi, Sheff. What's going on?
Hey, people. Love you very much.
Hey.
Well, we love you too. We talk about you on the show all the time. We talk about your book all the time because we reference it a lot, and it's just full of good information. And we wanted to do a show with you today, so we're glad you're here.
I'm here I'm queer. Get used to it. It's well, not quite. A little. Not really. It's Father's Day, so when we're recording this.
Recording it on Father's Day. Yeah.
I posted a couple notes on Facebook. Number one, I thank the biological father for the gifts. Number one, of the seed that the universe provides, of the family gifts, the ribald sense of humor, the sense of kind of a BS detector. And then I think properly addressed his shortcomings as a human being and asked him and let him know it's never too late to make amends. And then in the second note, I thanked all the spiritual fathers because Lord knows if we don't have spiritual fathers, we're pretty screwed. Because, one person cannot be a representation to the entire pantheon of male behavior that needs to be modeled. And we've gotten that all wrong in our culture, in which we decided to nucleate the family and break it into two people who are overwhelmed, and then give women the choice to fight to also abandon the family so they can go to the job and be taxed, and then nobody's at home, and then Hillary Clinton comes along and says it takes a village to raise a child, by which she means the state instead of the actual village. That's about where we live, so happy Father's Day.
Wow.
Yeah, happy Father's Day. I know. My dad, I have a lot of, I think I've carried a lot of traits from my father as well. I think, as you say, you some of the things you adapt from your parents, are good traits, cool things that you're glad that they taught you. Like, my dad had a very keen sense of, he's very politically astute, he's very critically thinking. He's a private investigator by trade. And so he likes to, I think I've adopted that curiosity and the ability to look into things and sort of dig deeper and research things. And he never told me what to think. He always kind of just led me to figure things out. And so I appreciate that from my dad.
I understand you better now that your father was an investigator.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're an unusually curious person to a depth, really, that most people can't tolerate, but you can. You actually have the ability to tolerate real depth in investigation. Most people, they want to know a little, but not a lot.
Yeah.
So congratulations and happy Father's Day. So you guys, I'm on your show. I've been on your show a lot because we're good friends and love each other and I at least have imaginary sex with both of you, really. Now that I'm being honest about it, I mean, why lie? But that's just me in my private time. But I did a long talk on the John B. Wells show.
Yeah. Yes. And I was like, who is this guy? We got to get him on.
Virstyne thought he sounded Jewish and got excited. So.
Yeah, I did. You know me.
Yeah, I do. I got 35 to 40 minutes, and why don't you just point me in a direction, wind me up, and we'll talk about this concept of the gooey religious center of science, which I think is, I think after doing this work for a long time, well, it seems a long time in my life now, it's 12 so years, it makes sense to me that that's what I'm looking at when I look at the sciences. Because we can talk about religion, we can talk about the problems with the Bible, which is really one movie and then another movie. If you think about the Bible, it's very funny. It was just pointed out to me. Why do we call a book that had no relation to another book the first book? Like it's not even a sequel. The New Testament is not a sequel to the Old Testament. They're barely related. They're only related because people say they are. The Old Testament was not written with a sequel in mind. It's the story of the Jews of Israel, of the Hebraic tribes. Who failed, really, got crushed and had to rebrand themselves, to use that terminology. Hey, we're not here to overthrow you Romans. Hey, there's a Prince of Peace. And then the Romans adopted it, and suddenly we get this new story that drags along the old story. So you can beat up on religion all day long, and all the scientific elite will clap their hands and, oh, isn't it wonderful? But if you turn the pointing stick at them and say, funny, though, very funny, because all your sciences have Old Testament myths at their core. Right. Mm-hmm. Every one of them.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Go on. I'm listening.
Prompt me with a question or.
Well, I've been I think I've talked about this on the show before. A few years ago, I dated an atheist, and at the time, it was interesting that he came into my life because I was toying.
Came into your what?
To my life.
Your life. Sorry.
My life. Oh my God! I don't even want to know what word you thought I said.
Nothing.
Anyway.
I forget it.
Okay, so he came into my life, and it was just interesting because I think, people come into your life at certain times in your life for certain reasons, and at that time, I was really just fed up with religion because I've seen so many people that were religious hypocrites. I, knew people that would go to church every Sunday, but yet, they molested children, or they were just horrible, judgmental people, but yet they hid behind the Bible, or they were Bible thumpers, and I was done. So I really, at that time, I was taking it to mean that religion was bad, right? So I was toying with the fact about maybe if I was an atheist, I wouldn't have to deal with all this bullcrap. So I understand people that are atheists, and because I was there. I was kind of going there for a minute. And I date this guy, and comes to find out he's just as much as a religious zealot as the next person, maybe even worse, because he's parading to be something else. Not saying he was a bad person. I think he was a good guy. I think he had a good heart. But I found him at times being just as judgmental and fanatical and fascist as any other religious person who he would always talk about. And then so then we get into this whole thing where we're doing the show, and sometimes we get trolls on our page, or trolls attack our friends, and they're just in this kind of state of first of all, if you have a different point of view than the popular, so-called scientific point of view, then you're a horrible person. It's not even open for debate. It's crazy. It's like you say vaccines are in question, and then they call you a science denier, conspiracy theorist. What are the other pejorative terms that they use?
Yeah, murderer. If you don't believe in vaccines, you're actually a murderer to them, which you can go nowhere with a discussion like that because they're on a witch hunt. You're now a witch, and they're hunting you. So they're going to drown you, and if you drowned, you were apparently guilty. And if you floated, you're a witch, and they have to drown you. It's that kind of 15th century logic that we now encounter. So when I say the sciences now have a GUI religious center, and that center is coated with some technical, some plastic and some metal and some math, so it's more difficult to see the GUI religious center. Well, that exactly mirrors the Middle Ages, when very few people could read, and almost no one could read Latin. The only people who could read Latin were the monks who studied it. Latin was the language of the ancient world, which was feared and venerated. There was a great civilization that once lived called the Roman Empire. And now we had all these scattered tribes of Europe that had taken in its seeds, but not just the seeds of the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire had been, infected by or metamorphosed with the seeds of the Hebraic cult that it had sought to oppress. Very strange bit of history. They had tried and tried and tried to kill the Jews, and they more or less succeeded until the Jews went underground and changed their story. The Jewish story for a long time is we're going to have a Messiah, an anointed one, which maybe relates to cannabis, by the way, maybe, an anointed one with holy oils. We're going to have a military ruler who's going to overthrow your ungodly occupation of Palestine, of Galilee, of that part of the Mediterranean, the Levant, what we now call Israel and Palestine. So they had a military concept in their head as to how to gain freedom. The Jews did, and they had King David, and then the lineage of King David, which went backward in time and forward in time, I think, all the way to Jesus. And then they were waiting for someone, and they didn't get anybody, or they got a lot of military messiahs who came and tried to overthrow, and they were all crucified, killed, and their leader and their ruler and their followers were all killed too. Then one day you just heard about, because there's nothing in the historical record, there's precious little, there's nothing contemporaneous that occurred at the same time about this guy called Yeshua. But There are many people called Yeshua, which got translated to Jesus through the Greek, I think. But there were many, many people called Yeshua, but there was no Yeshua who did all these miracles written about at the time, which is funny because there were many Roman histories being written at the time. It was the early height of the Roman Empire under Augustus. So, the battles between he and Mark Antony had all been recorded. It was post-Julius Caesar. I mean, it was a very busy time with many people writing and high culture taking place. But there's nothing there. Then 40 to 70 years exactly after the guy supposedly lived, there appear these books in succession. These books contradict each other, the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who told very different stories of this guy, and those eventually were assembled to become the beginning of the New Testament. Confusing stuff. That really contained all the seeds of the ancient Hebraic tribe were held inside because it dragged along the Pentateuch or the Torah. I mean, when you hear the Jews read the Torah, they're reading the Old Testament. I mean, they're it's like people who think that the second set of Star Wars movies don't really exist, like me. I just don't count them. They don't exist in my head. There's only Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. There's nothing else, not even Return of the Jedi, because they all suck. And they destroy the real mythology that has value. So they dragged along all the old Hebraic stuff. And Hebraic stuff came out of a culture that was pinned in the ancient world in 1000 BC, that was pinned between the Assyrians and the Persians. The Babylonian Empire was over its shoulder. And the Hebrews were a smaller group of tribes, and they had to distance themselves, or they chose to distance themselves in all areas of physical practice. So they became very, very fussy and fastidious in all of their physical practices, and they had deadly clear lines about what sex was for, and it was clearly not for fun. It was clearly not for anything but procreation, and you did have to procreate. You had a duty to God or Yahweh to procreate. Laying with a man would get you killed, and they were the only culture in the ancient world that really had a law against homosexuality. Other cultures looked down upon it. The ancient Greek culture actually venerated homosexuality between teenage boys and adult men for some reason. They really oppressed women in Athens, and they made the cult of the male-male thing. It's difficult to understand, really. I can't quite understand it, but that's the way it was. Homosexuality was not in any way forbidden in the ancient world, but the Jews forbade it. The Romans did not forbid it. In fact, it was rumored that Julius Caesar initiated Octavianus, who became Augustus Caesar that way. So what we've inherited, and what this little story is about, is the inheritance of our culture, of the ancient Hebraic culture. And I'm not putting Jews down. I'm 2/3 one myself, or something like that, 5/8, 2/3. But modern Jews really have nothing in common with ancient Hebraic culture. Do you know who does? Modern Christians. Modern Christians have everything in common with ancient Hebraic culture. Modern Jews shrug their shoulders. They're pluralistic. They're democratic. I'm not talking about the orthodoxy in Israel or here, but they live in the modern world with technology, and they believe that people have a right to do things. They're discussion-oriented, not Leviticus-oriented. They had enough time with that. It's sort of a bother to them. Like, it's enough, get off my back. But Christians take that ancient book, Leviticus, which prohibits men laying with men and you laying with anyone but your husband. Now, men can lay with any woman, really. You can't, except the king's wife. Men can have many, many wives in the ancient texts. And so we inherit the culture that makes women, what? Slaves to the home. Right? So all of this is religion, and all the good intellectuals and atheists always bash religion. But tell me something. When we go and give somebody a vaccine, and we know that any ingredient in that vaccine, if we were to give that ingredient on its own, and I were not a doctor, and I just had a syringe full of aluminum, and I injected it into adult, I would be, arrested for the rest, and put in jail for the rest of my life. I'd probably go to jail for attempted murder. If I did it with squalene, thimerosal, mercury, if I had a test tube full of monkey ovary proteins or hamster ovary proteins in which these vaccines are grown, I'd go to jail for the rest of my life. So why is it that liberal, science-friendly agnostics let themselves so easily off the hook for that? And my argument is that because vaccination is a religious function.
Well, and they don't really. I think they really don't really know what's in them. They think they do, but they don't want to look into it. They're above it because they know that they're, you know, or they think that they're morally superior, so they're not going to even bother, you know.
Well, it's really bizarre. Like, you had those friends, Virstyne, that were vegetarian or vegans or whatever. But then when you bring up the fact that, but they were totally pro-vaccine. So then if you bring up the fact that vaccines use aborted fetal tissue and they use animal parts to cultivate their viruses, they have to use a living host. Yeah. So it's some form of animal. They sort of dismiss that. That's okay, because it's for vaccines, you know.
Oh yeah, we're not friends anymore.
I won't eat a turkey, but I'll, you know, for Thanksgiving, but I'll vaccinate because that's okay. So it's sort of like hypocrisy in that liberal culture that has this, you know, and they were all up in arms about STD vaccines too. I remember that was like the main thing. Well, why wouldn't you give your child a hepatitis B vaccine? Well, because they're a child and they're not having sex, and there's so many reasons. I don't even need to get into all of them because we talk about vaccines so often that we've covered that. But
my child is hooker.
Well, bizarre, they also had this kind of like, you know, they appealed to authority a lot. They needed somebody to tell them what was right or what was wrong. They couldn't look into it. That's what I found really bizarre. And I found a side of them that, and I think it was more, I think my girlfriend, or one of my friends that used to be a female friend of mine and her boyfriend. And I think in that situation the girlfriend was open, but I think once the boyfriend kind of got involved, she didn't have the courage to really stand up and speak her ground. And then, you know, I think she also had cancer, or I call it a cancer scare because she didn't go through chemo and all that stuff. She just they found some cells in her that they thought were cancerous, and they immediately cut them out of her and doing damage to, you know, a part of her body. That anyway, but you know, I tried to send her some info on that, and then you know, I think I sent her something from Dr. Mercola, and then what he does, her boyfriend did, was Google Dr. Mercola, and you know, like the first probably the first link that came out was like Quackwatch. And you know, like Quackwatch is no more, it's like a sophisticated gossip magazines for so-called intellectual that are really no more morally superior than the National Enquirer, you know. But they're going to take that and they're going to, you know, they're going to run with it instead of listening to Dr. Mercola himself. And, you know, they would say things like, oh, Quackwatch has all of these awards and accolades. But, yeah, Dr. Mercola has more live patients. You know, he has more, it's like this, I don't know how to describe it. I would say part of it is, I think it's appeal to authority. So they needed somebody to tell them what to think, and they didn't have like the common sense to actually go and listen to the other side of the story. Maybe it's laziness too, I don't know.
Well, it's these scientists that have replaced what Liam was talking about, the religion, you know, the priest or the preacher or the pope. These new deities are these figures of science, because they really are full of crap. I mean, if you look at the work of Jonas Salk or, you know, Louis Pasteur, these people who are idolized in the science world, Charles Darwin, their stuff is shit, and their work is shit. So, but you know, it doesn't matter, because it's a religious belief that you have in their work, and it's and to question them is like questioning the church. You don't do it. You don't ask questions about it. You just follow it, because otherwise it's sacrilege, or you're being disrespectful.
You're like, yeah, how did something explode out of nothing, or nothing explode into something? I don't know. How does it go? Well, and then they're like, which basically, you know, they can't answer that. I think some of it too has, you know, you prompt these people with questions and they can't answer, and they think that, you know, they're all above it and superior because, they'll say things like, well, what studies have you read and what doctors have you, talked to? Well, you're like, actually, what studies have you read? Because to come to all of these, especially like getting on the subject of vaccination, because that's kind of like a thing that's really close to both of us. You get on these threads or whatever, people will come to you and say, well, show me studies, and then, you show them studies, and then the studies aren't good enough because, well, then they'll say, oh, well, these aren't peer-reviewed, and then you show them that they're peer-reviewed. Oh, well, the doctors are kooks. Well, why? Because they don't agree with you? You have to name call, and that's their first instinct. It's to name call and to berate instead of asking, why do you have the point of view that you have? We've lost the ability to talk to each other, too. That's the first instinct, is just to name call if you don't agree. It's very childish, to a certain.
Yes, it is, and they're stupid poopy heads, and I hate them. So I think we should address some of the things that were brought up. To say that Jonas Salk was crap, we have to explain. It's in my book. It's in Chapter 5, Official Stories. But Jonas Salk was tasked with finding a virus that caused paralysis in children. Now, at the time that this was happening, the U.S. government was spraying DDT on children to kill flies. DDT is a potent neurotoxin. It causes paralysis in children. Now, an unschooled person might think that you could stop there and make a pretty good argument that spraying a potent organochlorine neurotoxin on children, on their food, on dairy cows that comes out in the milk that the children would drink, on orchard fruit that the children would eat, that you could make a good argument that this polio, which was called the summer plague, for occurring when people were eating orchard fruit and standing outside where they were being sprayed, rather than any other kind of bacteriological problem which spreads when people are in close contact held indoors, you see, makes good sense. And in fact, if you do look at the research that guys like Jim West and Janine Roberts have done, you see that the thing's pretty well sewn up. In fact, there were researchers at that point, Morton Biskin and I want to say Ralph Scobie, who doctors who got in front of Congress and wrote these long, well elucidated, very clear papers about the toxicological poisoning that was going on. But Jonas Salk didn't matter. He took 17,000 monkeys from Asia and Africa, cut them open, ripped their livers and their kidneys and ovaries out, and used this mash to grow what? They take broken spinal cord from other animals and dried and desiccated and ground up, and they would take stuff that had been sitting around in test tubes filled with feces, really, because they considered polio to be a fecal gastrointestinal bug. And then they just grew stuff, then they filtered some liquid off of it, said they had a virus in it, filled it with formaldehyde so as to kill or attenuate the virus, and injected it into children, at which point, guess what happened? Paralytic polio rates went up. That was considered a great failure. And you can read a Harper's magazine from '56, I think. That's very mordantly, with teeth, asking what the hell happened here. They blamed a bad batch, and then they switched to the oral vaccine, which really is just something that passes through your gut, and I don't think it has much effect at all. They also banned DDT by 70. They then changed the definition of polio from something that lasted just a day or 2 days or a week. Because if you had any symptoms in the summer period, it could be any toxic that looked like to us pesticide poisoning. They would call that polio. But after they put the vaccine out, they needed you to be sick for 2 whole months, 60 days. And most people didn't stay sick for 60 days. They had sickness for a few days or a week. And the vast majority didn't become paralyzed. The more people became paralyzed after vaccination, then and of course it was the DDT areas that was the same in the Philippines, where adult military officers were being sprayed against mosquitoes with DDT, and they had inexplicably high rates of polio. Now, this may sound like a sensible argument to people who haven't been brainwashed into thinking that the polio virus saved the world from polio. But this is why it's a religion. And when I say it's a religion, I mean very specifically that on the outside they do math. On the outside they do a little theoretical math. They mess around with glass beakers, and they grow stuff. It's a witch's brew. You don't know what they're growing. They siphon off the liquid, they put it into syringes, they mix it with metals and preservatives and MSG and plastics and horrible stuff, or I should say polysorbate, which is not a plastic, and horrible stuff. And then they inject it into 8-pound people over and over again until they're 12 years old, at which point I guess they're safe. I don't know. So you see, it's a religion, but what is it to the liberals? And my feeling is, or my argument is, that it's baptism.
Yeah.
Because we killed coming of age. We don't have coming of age ceremonies culturally. I went to prom and it was a bore. You know, coming of age ceremonies are supposed to be a little bit dangerous. I had some real coming of age ceremonies that weren't on the agenda. You know, where I have conflicts with my peers, or we as a group of boys would run off and do something very dangerous and stupid together. And go on an ill-advised trip, hitchhike, go somewhere, end up somewhere where we didn't know where we were. Those were coming-of-age ceremonies. That's where we began to feel the size and breadth of the world and the potential danger in it. But we don't allow that. We don't allow anybody to do anything dangerous. We want people to plant gardens on their iPods. We want them to play Happy Plant and Happy Garden on their bloody computers instead of outside, because everybody's so afraid of the world, which is a dangerous place, but they're so afraid of it that they don't realize any of the joy of it. So true atheistic, science-worshipping liberals do not baptize, they vaccinate. And it's the same impulse. It's the same impulse.
There are no scientific studies to back up what you're saying. I'm really kidding. But I'm just saying, that's what, you go into a long drawn-out explanation, and that's what a lot of people would say. There are no studies. Oh, it's the same anecdotes we hear all the time. Right? It's like they read.
I don't think that's anything that they hear, by the way. I don't think by the way, I don't consider it to be a drawn out. I thought that was on point, and I'm proud of it.
Oh, no.
No, I'm not saying it was drawn out. No.
What?
No.
All right, you went.
No. Wasn't that in, no. Wasn't that in, Zohan? Right? It was the only funny Adam Sandler movie, in my opinion. Zohan, no. Like Jews and Middle Easterners, we're always, no. All right. Anyway, the other thing I'm going to say, I don't think that anybody really presents that argument. So I take your point as comedy that I don't have any scientific studies. But we've all looked at scientific studies, and I believe that I summed up a scientific study as follows. A scientific study is when you pay somebody to find the results they're hoping to find, right?
Right.
Send more cash. We didn't get what we hoped for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you read the study, a lot of time, but there's people who say that don't actually read it.
Oh.
Because if you read it a lot of the time, they actually do find these things to be harmful and ineffective. But then the outcome, the abstract, or their end result is always what they wanted in the first place. Or they always come back to the abstract, whatever they thought it was going to be, and then they just make it happen.
Is like the reader's. It's not even the reader's. It doesn't have the decency. An abstract. Why don't they just call it what we wish we found?
Right.
Because I don't know if you're used to reading abstracts, but the abstract can be 100% the opposite. Like the Padian study, the famous Padian study from the HIV. Now, HIV is a religion. It's Leviticus. I told you what the ancient Hebrew tribes said. Gays are bad, and sex with the Auslander, as the Germans would come to say, the outsider to the tribe, right? That's bad. Now, the AIDS theory says that gay men and Africans, after they have sex, 20 years later, we're not quite sure when, right? But eventually, and you just have to trust us, you will eventually die, maybe. Send more cash, we're still doing research. So that's AIDS theory as far as anybody can really tell. And you're supposed to believe this. Then you're supposed to let them test you. But the test isn't a test for anything. We can talk about it another time or later. But AIDS theory is Hebrew Leviticus. It's what the American Western sex crazy in 1968-9 culture got as blowback for having, and I talk about this in Chapter 6 of Official Stories, got as a result of the birth control pill. The birth control pill let girls screw as liberally as boys screwed, and they enjoyed that for a while. They had kids out of wedlock, which wasn't new in history. But people were very anxious about that. And there were a lot of STDs, real STDs, which hurt, which you find on your genitals, and they cause pain. And they took, they had the 70s as payment, and it was tough. Now, the gay community followed suit, and they demanded the same rights, and they moved into the inner cities. The young gay men did, full of testosterone. Young gay men are men. First and foremost, they're men, and sexual satisfaction for men is not so much about touch and being held or, foreplay as much as it is about ejaculation, because it's very quick for young men to be able to come, to ejaculate. Very fast. And so you could do this many times a night, and in order to do this many times a night, of course, you have to take drugs to stay up and drugs to stay erect and drugs to what? Drugs to fight all the real STDs that you have. And when you take all those drugs, what do you take? Antibiotics by the fistful. And when you take the antibiotics by the fistful, you kill your gut, you punch holes in your gut, you strip your epithelial lining, you take a spoon and essentially scrape the inside of your gut and take all the good bacteria out and rip away the villi, which are protective and absorb nutrients. You leak into your blood, and you have every sickness and every fungal infection known to man. You go into the hospital, you stumble in, and they say, well, it must be because you're gay, not because you've taken fistful of antibiotics, not because you put benzene in your colon, benzene, a deadly carcinogen, into your colon in the lubricants. No, we're not going to worry about that. Same way we don't worry about DDT. We're not going to worry about that. Now, the conservatives came along and said, God hates fags, and the liberals came along and said, no, he doesn't. It's a scientific problem. We'll solve it scientifically. You have a virus that you don't know that you have, and you got it, and you won't know if you have it for 20 or 30 years, so we have to test you and give you these drugs. We're scientists.
Yeah. But it's politically incorrect in the liberal world to say that it's a lifestyle choice, or that the gay lifestyle can cause some sort of sickness if they do like what you're describing, going and having sex several times a night and doing copious amounts of drugs and then having to take antibiotics for that. That can lead to some form of sickness, but that would be politically incorrect according to the liberal. But I think most men, and I grew up in San Francisco. I was in drama in college, so I hung out with a lot of gay men, and they didn't. It was very. They knew that when it's two guys, they can just see each other and just have sex and not even talk or know their names. I mean, it was sort of like, well, that's just it's not a big deal. We get it. When it's a man and a woman, the guy recognizes that he has to court her and he has to sort of seduce her and win her over. But when it's two guys, they can just kind of do it, and they would have a large number of partners to which they could not even give me the number, either because they were embarrassed or they didn't remember. Yeah. But they could be at a gym, working out, see another guy, and then they'd go into the parking lot and it was on. Yeah. And so they recognized that they have that this is their lifestyle, but yet it's politically incorrect to call that out and to say, but they admit it. What are you talking about? They're telling you that this is how they admit that two men. It's just a different way of thinking of sex. Well, and so when it's man on man, it's different.
Well, when it's young men driven by testosterone, who don't have anywhere else to go, and remember, they had no normalization of anything. There was no property. You can't inherit anything. It's a disaster. They were hated. They were on the run from Idaho and Ohio and Iowa and every other place that wouldn't have them. And they ran to a very few places and a very few big, large urban centers. And, that's what you get to do when you're a young man. And if women acted that way, I would have had every STD in the world, I would have been taking antibiotics. I would have gutted myself if women were the same as men, but they're not. They're trained not to be, and they have a natural inclination, I think, to be more protective of their bodies because they can get pregnant. It's not really complicated, but nobody likes to talk about it. And people who talk about AIDS. People who talk about AIDS and, like the new Julia Roberts will, pretends that they know and or like or care about the gay community are absolutely full of shit because they don't understand anything about young testosterone-driven people. We happen to call them young gay men, but, it's the testosterone, which leads to quick coupling. It's the potential for very quick orgasm. This is men, very quick, not hours but minutes, which leads to the possibility of having many of these per night. All of them are endorphin producing and make you feel really good. So you take poppers to keep erect, which are a carcinogenic drug that you huff, and you take drugs to go to sleep at night, and you take amphetamines to stay awake and to go back to work, and on and on and on. When does it end? It ends when you wake up, as John Lauritsen said, gray-faced and exhausted, your gut's broken by antibiotics, your mitochondria destroyed by antibiotics. That's what they do. That's the engine of your cell. It's like taking your heart out of your body. That's it. Mitochondria is like saying heart, for people who don't know what it means. You just don't have anything pumping blood in your cells anymore or making energy, electricity in your cells, so you fade. You go into the hospital, they shrug their shoulders and say, why don't we give you some DDT? Well, they don't have DDT to give you, so they give you Cipro. Cipro, which is, a super antibiotic, as though you're not sick enough already. A lot of guys get sick. A lot of them die. The guys in the hospital shrug their shoulders. It's a mystery. They call the virus hunters who've been religiously looking for something that could cause cancer. They never find a virus. They always look for proteins. The proteins are never specific. They make a test that's not specific, and they give it to people in the Leviticus camp. And the Leviticus camp are what? Gay men and dark-skinned people, all the people outside of the tribe, the Christian tribe. So we're testing all the people who are on the outside of the tribe. We test them with tests that come up positive for most people, and then when they come up positive for these people, we say they're true, and when they come up positive for you, April or me, they say they're false, or they just don't do them. And, Virstyne, you're well-educated, you're on the cusp, you probably wouldn't go in for one, but if you did, they could tell you that you might be at risk, unless you said, I swear to God, if you said, well, I've only had one boyfriend and he was European, and it could be a false. I had a more of an acquaintance, but she was a PhD. She was working in the adult scientific field, but not laboratory science. But she was working in that field, and she had, she was reading all those papers. She went in for a test because she was with a boyfriend. She hadn't had a boyfriend for a long time. She was healthy, I guess. She had a couple health issues that I think may be related to vaccine stuff, like allergenic stuff. And these tests will come up positive for any overproduction of antibodies from anything. So she didn't know, but she just kind of agreed to a test because it was a state hospital, and she just agreed. So she gets this test. It comes up reactive. She freaks out. I happen to be in contact with her for something else, and she and I had never talked about this. I had been talking to her about something else. And I said, oh, well, funny you were talking to me. You better read this. I had her read 10 papers published in the standard medical literature that explain that HIV testing is not specific. The proteins all occur in every disease. The proteins cannot easily be typified, but they don't come from any virologic source. They have molecular weights that were all agreed upon by consensus. Like we found a weight of a protein that's 43 kilodaltons and you found a 40, so why don't we call it 41? It's this kind of thinking that people don't know goes on in the sciences, but it's about, to the scientific elite, it would be about as unacceptable as, Noah and the ark is true because, I found a piece of wood in, Syria that could have been from a boat. It's just that garbage. So she went in and she said, I've been reading these papers. I'm not in a risk group. I'm having some concerns about this test result. Can I figure out what your protocol? So the clinician who gave her the tests, and I did an interview with her, which I think you can still find online. But the clinician who did the test said, yes, I too was concerned because you're not in a risk group, and it doesn't really make sense, and we probably shouldn't have tested you, but we did. So they looked into it. Now, by the end of the week, I didn't know what had happened, but she had talked to this person a couple of times, and they were going to go back and retest it, but instead, she might have retested, but I don't recall exactly, but I remember by the end of the week getting a call saying, Liam, you will not believe what just happened. I said, what? Try me. Well, I called the hospital, and I said, what? And she said, I'm not. They said it was a false positive. I said, big surprise, How did they know? And they said, well, did they retest you? No. They said that they were recalibrating. They had a problem with their spectrophotometer, by which they read the things, and they were just not counting the test result. And she said, but you won't believe what happened now. I said, what? I said she asked for her test results so she could actually see it, and they said that they had lost it. In fact, not just lost one, but lost it and the Western blot and so on. I said, yeah. Wow. Now you know. It's a religion, and if they don't want you, they'll throw you back if you protest. And if you're in a risk group, if you're dark-skinned enough or gay, and your test non-reactive or not reactive enough, they have a funny word, and they'll tell you that you're not a false positive, but you're a false negative, and they'll keep testing you until they get what they want.
That's really sick.
Yeah, sick is the perfect word, yeah.
Right, and it's one of the things that Virstyne and I were talking about when we were wanting to have you on to discuss this show was because I had been attacked by somebody not that long ago for calling Darwinism or, a blind belief in Darwin's theories a religion. And he called me a Bible thumper or suggested that I may be a Bible thumper, which is funny because, I haven't been to church since I was 6. My grandma took me. So, I wasn't raised with religion. It's not like something that I had to run away from, I just wasn't raised with it. So, it just is a bizarre comment. But anywho,
but it tells a lot about where he has to go. Because as Virstyne pointed out, instead of saying, well, what do you mean? Well, tell me what you mean. What do you mean? Very simple question. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard that. What do you mean? Well, and then you would get to explain yourself. Well, the fact is, or my opinion is this. No. You must be a Bible thumper because only a knuckle-dragging miscreant would disbelieve the great work of the great legendary genius himself, Charlie Darwin, who had such issues with women that he forgot that his mother died when he was young and couldn't talk about it and thought women were not to be sexual creatures in any way. And really everything that we've inherited about women besides coming from Leviticus, a lot of it passed through the mouth of Charles Darwin. The whole Victorian conceptualization of women belongs in many ways to not just to Darwin, but it's there in his work and his writing. And because he became so venerated by those people, we tended to believe scientifically that women were the weaker, fairer sex that didn't have any desire for sex, and that's all in Chris Ryan and Casilda Jethah's book, Sex at Dawn, which is a fine piece of work.
But it's not just that. I mean, Darwin was full of it in a lot of ways, and that what you're talking about with the HIV myth or the vaccine myth, a lot of that I think is sort of umbrellas under this like social Darwinism model. Yeah, exactly. And so that because they're just kind of experimenting, seeing what's going to happen and throwing everything up against the wall to see what sticks. And that was this idea that the social Darwinists were obsessed with was who is going to survive once we if we test, if we round up the Jews and we put them in a concentration camp and we start putting fluoride in the water, we want to see what's going to happen. Are they going to get docile? Is it going to affect their brain neurologically? And it was just sort of in the name of science, or what they called to be science. So so what I explained to him was that what I meant by that was that religion is something that's is faith-based. It's not based on actual science, or it's not based on data research, data collection and actual research observations. It's based on a faith. You either believe in it or you don't. And so a lot of the belief in this social Darwinism or in Darwin's theories is something that you just have to have faith in, because if you actually dig into it, and as you pointed out, Liam, with the example that you just gave, it's crap. You know, it doesn't make any. It's not based. It's just his own bias that made him say that. His own feelings about his issues that he hadn't dealt with of his mother's death, and so, you know, that was one example that he had of a situation where his mother was apparently fragile and she died early, and so he just took that and generalized that for the female race, for the female gender.
Well, he was a difficult, troubled soul. But to be fair, if we're talking about the theory of evolution, Darwin's theory of evolution wasn't really his. He had a grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, who was much more of a sexual roue, a cad, and enjoyed himself much more, which was maybe shameful to young Charlie. Charles' thought was really and I've said it's in chapter 8 of my book. There's stories, but I go into it in great detail. Darwinism is essentially anti-uniformitarianism, which is a Christian thought that God created, Yahweh created the world, and the world was always the same afterward. This, of course, is not true. Things change. Pantarei said Heraclitus, everything is fire, everything is flux. So the Victorians had to fight the old church concept, really the old societal concept, that everything is as it has always been, that nothing has ever changed. They found dinosaur bones. They found things the skeletons on top of mountains that couldn't have possibly have been there because they were fish, unless things had changed. So the notion of the world was suddenly very different. And Darwin, like other taxonomists at the time, the Count de Buffon was somebody who did taxonomy. I mean, this was just a going field at the time. He was not an outstanding or rare person. In fact, his theory he really had to share with a guy whose name now escapes me, and that's what happens in history. I mean, this concept of his, that things would breed, and then by breeding they would take a trait that had arisen, and that trait would become more important over time, which is sort of a nice comic book argument that if you can imagine that, a worm for some reason somehow grows a little spurt on its side, and that spurt, it mates, and that spurt is there in the child worm, and then that child worm somehow mates, and that spurt on its side somehow develops other spurts, and somehow, for reasons nobody understands, that eventually becomes an arm with bones in it. This doesn't work biomechanically at all. Life doesn't work through that series of accidents, and that's what Darwin had to give the world, because he couldn't just say the universe has a mind. It's not Yahweh. It's not the Christian God. We don't know what it is. It's intelligent. It's using forms and factors that seem to exist everywhere in nature. We'd be foolish to say they happened by accident. We don't understand them, but we'd be very foolish and arrogant to say they were accidents. We don't see the overarching pattern. They weren't really working with electricity, and so they didn't have the concepts of Lichtenberg figures, the lightning figure, or what they now call the Fibonacci sequence, which is really just another way of saying the lightning figure, or the spiraling figure. The fractal figure really came into prominence in the late 70s or 80s in popular culture. All of nature repeats in these fractaline shapes. If you watch some of Chapter 9 of my book, talks about the electric universe, which is repeatable plasma experiments that show the shape of galaxies and nebulae and stars and rings of Saturn and so on, without using gravity, use the electromagnetic force. And it is the electromagnetic organizing principle that makes our molecules, that makes cells, everything else. Well, Darwin had no bloody freaking concept of this. The same way that activists have no bloody freaking concept of what strong antibiotics do to mitochondria, or what they do to the gut, or how young gay men, given nowhere else to go, how often they will have sex to orgasm, and how many STDs they'll get. And if you don't know the details, then you're in a religion. If the details don't matter to you, then you're in a cult. That's it. Period. And the cult that is Darwinism, by the way, that thing you talked about that we call eugenics, it's in the Bible. It's the old tribal compulsion to separate from the tribe member from the non-tribe member. It's as old as ancient Greece, Babylon, Syria. It's as old as the first agricultural group that ever existed, and we have on record, and that in many, it's not the Jews, but they resemble it, that said, if you're not in our tribe, you don't mate with our women, and if you mate with our woman, that child is still a Jew. That's why that is there, so that, you know what I'm saying? So even if you're a rapist and you take one of our women, but if you're a man and you leave our tribe with another woman, that child is not a Jew, which doesn't really make sense to me, but that's what they did. So we got all these old religious things about who can and who can't be in the tribe. AIDS is that. Darwinism is that. They're not in the tribe, said Goebbels, you know, and Himmler and Hitler. They said, you're not in our tribe, Jews, so we get to do what we want with you. And now the scientific elite says, you're not in our tribe, so we'll call you any name we want. So we're not in their tribe, and I'm sure they'd like to kill us.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, too, like, kind of going back to what April was talking about with the experimentation of, like, Jews and fluoride in the water. I got into a debate, so to say, with this guy, and he was saying, well, religion has killed far more people than science has. And I was like, are you kidding me? Right? With all of the experiments. Could you elaborate on that, about the experimentation that people have done in the name of science that has killed and crippled numerous amounts of people all over the world?
Well, I have an alarm bell going off because I have, it is Father's Day, and I have to visit some of the illegitimate children that I'm accused. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. As far as I know, you know, my mother gave me one bit of sex advice that I think I took too literally. I was a teenager, and she said, just whatever you do, don't get anybody pregnant. And I swear, I just thought she meant, like, forever. Like, that's the rule. Whatever you do, don't get anybody pregnant. So, for some, you know, I don't think that she meant forever. So I have to now reconsider if I'm going to have kids at this late age of 43. But I do have some errands to do before the sun goes too low. And if you want to talk about the scientific experimentation, I think in terms of talking about how many religious people were killed, people were killed for religion, you know, the many tens of thousands that were killed during the Inquisition were killed brutally. But if I said 60,000 people were killed on any particular, you know, in any particular battle of World War II, you see what I'm saying? We have a population density since 1960, 70 that makes it difficult to talk about numbers. So you have to talk about percentages. But if you talk about numbers, far more people have been killed in the scientific era for what I would call neo-religious means, you know, like Hitler's, or really the eugenics meme, which is a neo-religious meme. Hundreds of thousands of people died taking AZT, which was a drug that was given to gay men to stop them. You know, it's as bad as spraying people with DDT. When you're worried about flies, you spray them with something that kills them because you're afraid of flies. So they gave gay men AZT, which killed their bone marrow and stopped their guts from working, and they died. And you did that because you were worried that they had an invisible sex virus that you couldn't test for. We're always ghost hunting. You know, we're always swatting down with a heavy hammer on one thing and missing the obvious. And when we swat down, we're always crushing somebody's skull. So, you know, look up the number of dead in World War II in any particular battle. That's science. You know, that people say that's warfare. But that's a reasonable question, too. Warfare above and below what's called the line of civilization or technology. Warfare in tribes is just always like people throwing stones at each other maybe, or doing a slap fight, really, literally a slap fight to settle an argument in its worst scenario. Sometimes there are homicides when people are really starving. But, you know, small tribes don't engage in large-scale warfare. I'm not saying they're entirely peaceable, but some of them are, by the way. But they don't engage in large-scale warfare because they can't. They don't have the resources. They can't waste life that way. They can't waste energy that way. They're hunters and gatherers. They don't have stores of food put aside just in case you feel like going on a killing spree and you can't grow anything for a while. So the scientific era, or the era in which we crested the technological brink, is a very different world than the world that we lived in for 240,000 years. And then if you think we were a related species for quite literally millions of years before that. We're in a bubble. We're a strange creature in a little bit of bubble of time. Or at least that's my worldview.
Well, we thank you. I know you have to get going, and so we're really grateful that you came on our show today. And Liam, I mentioned when I introduced you that you have all this stuff going on, and I honestly I can't keep up with it anymore. I don't because you're always changing your shows and so. So when you are on radio now, right? You have a new show?
Yeah. This is much more stable. I was in a transition trying to figure out. I was doing the energy show, which I liked, but I said as much as I wanted to say about it. And it was making me feel a little depressed to talk about the failure of the energy state and the oil state and the Fukushima thing. So I needed a shift, and I have a show called The State of Cannabis. It's on video it's on TV in North Florida on 18.1 in and around Jacksonville. It streams on something called Mimi TV. I do interviews with people in the cannabis and hemp movement because hemp is a plant that's just coming back, and it has to come back so that we can have healthy CBD oil, which is non-psychoactive, which heals nervous systems, which we all need a little bit of. It's not a drug in any way that makes you see flying monkeys or anything like that. And we need the fiber to make paper and wood and pulp and building material because we do. We need local resources and textiles. So I'm very much in favor of that. The cannabis is good for THC is good for killing cancer, and I shouldn't have to explain to anybody why that's important. So The show is called State of Cannabis with Liam. You can just look it up online. And I'm writing a couple new books, and I should have kind of a more of a kind of an official stories. I think that covers maybe. Each topic will be a lot shorter, but it'll be faster, and it'll probably cover about 50 topics instead of 7 or 8 or 10. I guess his official stories is 10. So it'll be that kind of coffee table, introduction to all the big things, and I'll get to do things I didn't get to do last time because I spent a lot of time with each topic, so as to make it clear and present almost all of the really relevant hidden buried evidence. This will be faster and lighter, and then my next book itself is a sequel, maybe an unofficial sequel to Official Stories, in which I further a certain number of arguments about what we've been talking about the religions of science and the culture that we've inherited that we seem to be at odds with at all times. This culture of sex control, sexual exclusion, punishing women, punishing homosexuals. This is and running on oil at the same time. So we think we're scientific, but we're actually Old Testament. Take that. Take that, modern world.
Take that, everybody. And then what about the radio show? Is that still working? I mean, is that in the works?
State of Cannabis is on Truth Frequency Radio Mondays at 6 p.m. EST. So just look up State of Cannabis with Liam. It's on my website. Just click any links and walk through the portal.
And then they can follow you on Facebook and on your website, liamchef.com.
Yeah, the Facebook is where I update things because that's what Facebook is for.
Exactly. Okay, well, you heard it. So thanks for being on the show,
Thank you,
Liam. And enjoy the rest of your day. We are going to take a short break, and when we get back, Virstyne and I will close out the show. But as always, we love having Liam on, and we really appreciate him being here today.
Love you, beautiful girls. I miss you, and I wish I could get to the West Coast, and someday I will.
Okay.
All right. We'll hold you to it.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Everything I'm looking at seems crazy. The newspaper, the television, nothing's right. Nothing's telling me what's true. It's like I fell into a bucket of cream and kicked my legs until I became a mouse. What's that about? I'm a conspiracy realist, not a conspiracy theorist. I want a t-shirt that represents me. What? There's one that's available? Go to shop.truthertease.com, says the voice in my head. Shop.truthertease.com. It's not crazy. I'm not afraid to go on the internet and go to shop.truthertease.com. I'm not scared. I've taken out bowling balls that look like you. That's what I said. Straighten out. Get your conspiracy realist t-shirt. Don't make me come over there. You look good. You look good.
All right, welcome back. Thanks for listening to Truther Talk. We just said goodbye to our friend Liam Chef, and just as he was leaving, we wanted to talk more. We wanted to get the show to do a little bit of a longer show, but we got off to a little bit of a late start, so we had to let him go because he had things he had to do, and all of that. But you started asking him, Virstyne, about some of the medical experiments, some of the things that have been done in the name of science, because I guess, I had brought up the Holocaust and how that was a social Darwinist experiment. But then we also have many, many others who, I mentioned Jonas Salk, who we know who injected mental patients with syphilis in order to test his vaccines. I think Louis Pasteur also tested his vaccine on his own children. But what were you thinking of? Did you have something in mind you were kind of...
Well, I was thinking with the Tuskegee experiment, but was Jonas Salk involved in that?
I don't... Which one was that?
The Tuskegee experiment where they had black men, basically, and that had syphilis and told them that they were going to treat them, but they just basically watched them go crazy and die.
Oh, right. Was he involved in that? I believe maybe. I think that what he did was a similar thing. I don't know if he was involved in the same project, but it was definitely, he had some bit in that. But why don't you describe that, the Tuskegee experiment?
Well, no, that was basically it. I don't know, I can't but basically that's what they did. They told, they gathered some black men and they told them. So there's debate. There's people that say that either they already had syphilis and they went seeking treatment for syphilis, and they told them that they were giving them treatment for syphilis, and they didn't, and they just basically studied them and watched them go crazy and die. Or there's other people that said that they were intentionally injected with syphilis. So in my research, I've come across to like a little discrepancy as whether they had syphilis or they already had it, or they were intentionally injected. But basically, it's still cruel, what they did in the name of science. These people that are so-called scientists that people deify and make moral gods,
Right.
And it's funny because I remember getting into an argument with this guy, and we were talking about, I said that, what did I say? I said that scientists are subject to flaws and ego trips and, what do you call it, bribery, just like anybody else. They're people. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, he was like offended that I said that. For some people, it's so hard to believe that, they think that scientists are these gods on a pedestal who never, whose only intention is to help humanity progress, But they don't, they have their own agendas. There's some scientists are. I'm not saying that all scientists are bad, but sometimes scientists are. But I think that people need to realize that people are people in any field, in any race, any religion, they're people. So you're going to have psychopaths from every profession, from every, gender, walk of life. I don't know why that's such a hard concept for people to understand. And also the fact that, in science, there's no general consensus on a subject, and the opinion or that we tend to hear is the one that's backed financially by people that have agendas, and they have more money to get that message out there, marketing, There's this video that I sent you about the flu vaccine, and it's really well done, as far as it's animated, it's black and white, it looks very nice, but it's propaganda. Because if you study about antibodies, you would know that antibodies, these vaccines cause the presence of antibodies, but antibodies hasn't been proven as a way to prove that your body's been immune to a disease or not.
Yeah, to contract or to produce antibodies in a synthetic way like that, we cannot necessarily correlate that to immunization. So things are...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But you can even read the package inserts of a vaccine, and they say that.
Yeah, not one pharmaceutical company will tell you in their vaccine insert, if you read them, that they are giving you immunity. Not one. What they will tell you is that they have antibody in their control groups, they're producing antibodies, the person who has been injected is more likely to produce antibodies to the thing that they've been injected with. Well, duh. And so, but they will also produce antibodies to everything else that's in the vaccine. And which is why you see, we're seeing a huge rise in allergies, because one of the things that they use to lubricate the syringes that they have been for a really long time is what? Peanut oil. Well, we have a huge problem, epidemic style, in this country of people with peanut allergies. Well, in Israel, they use sesame oil. So guess what they're having a huge epidemic of allergies of in Israel?
Oh, wow.
Sesames, right? So people have these huge allergies to sesames. Also, eggs. They cultivate vaccines or the viruses in the eggs. So we're seeing a rise in egg allergies. So because they're producing antibodies, so the body will recognize it as a toxin and try to eliminate it. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you contract or if you come into contact with the disease itself in a natural way in the natural world, that your body's going to produce antibodies to that illness. So they don't know that. They're just guessing. And they don't really have...
It's a theory. But people want to regard it as a fact, as a proven fact. It's a theory that hasn't been proven. And in fact, you can prove the opposite, You can prove it if you're willing to read up on it. But a lot of people that claim they are science, that they believe in science, they're full of shit. They don't even read studies. They don't. Right. It's grueling, first of all. I mean, I've read studies because we've both read studies because we were researching this stuff for a few years, and, it's grueling. It's not like fun to read studies, but we started doing it because we really wanted to get down to the bottom of, the vaccine argument, and I did look at both sides, and I'm ended up on the anti-vaccine side, and I never thought I'd be on that side. Not that I judge people that were before, but I just, it's really mind-blowing if you really look at the evidence, as people would like to say. It's so funny. I was reading I was looking up a doctor. I think it was I was looking at, what was I looking at? It was a coffee enemas. Mm-hmm. And there's a web magazine called Science-Based Medicine. Okay, first of all, now at this point, when something says it's science-based, I automatically, in my head, it's like a red flag, because I feel like they have to kind of throw that in there as a little nudge, saying, I'm right. This is the best. This is, instead of letting people really make up their minds. So anyway, let me go on. So this this guy that has, it's a blog. I guess it's more of a blog. So he has his blog, and he was talking about, he was really disappointed in a doctor who he considered to be a mainstream scientist recommending, mainstream doctor, in the allopathic world, recommending coffee enemas to her patients. And then it's so funny, he lists the benefits of, she talks about the benefits of coffee enemas, and then he retorts by saying that, but there's been no studies to prove, and then he goes and talks about Gerson therapy and how Gerson, he was like, well, coffee enemas have their roots in Gerson therapy, but the Gerson therapy has never been proven to cure any type of cancer. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You didn't even read.
Except for the thousands of people who've been cured by Gerson therapy.
Yeah, that you can look up, or you can. Some of them are live to talk to. You can actually go talk to them. I'm like, wow, you're such an idiot. But there are people that will read that and be like, well, this guy must know what he's talking about, because he's, he writes for Science-Based Medicine. So, and it's like this thing. I feel like that some of these people have, it's a control issue.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I'm not trying to write articles on why this stuff doesn't work. I'm more so talking about the stuff that does. I'm not trying to, why do there have to be websites like that? Why do people, freedom of speech, God love it, freedom of speech. People are allowed to say and write whatever they want. I'm not against that per se, but I'm talking about the fact that people feel like they need to tell other people how to think, and they're not even doing research themselves. Why, if you want to be fair, why don't you put your beliefs out, and then people, I mean, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, I guess, why don't you let people basically make up their minds? Why do you feel like you need to tell them how? And these people that write these articles, they don't even research. They always say, they give a rundown of kind of skim the surface, and they don't research, and they just kind of scoff at it. They don't even say, they're like, oh, there's been no studies. But yeah, there's studies. Like, I couldn't get over the Gerson thing. Yeah, you can verify that. You can look that up.
Right.
But I don't know. It's trippy.
It is trippy. I mean, in the Gerson, when somebody is like a Gerson, they essentially Wakefield him, or that's the same kind of mentality as like to try and defame his character or defame, his work. Whereas if you just read the work, you just take it by itself, it's actually valid. It's just that when, but then they'll just try and say, well, he didn't know what he was doing, or he was a quack. Yeah. But why? Why would he do that? What was he selling?
Why was he a quack? Because he doesn't, basically because he doesn't agree with you. He's a quack. That's what you call people that don't agree with you. Or have a different point of view, or he's trying to find a cure. He's not intentionally hurting people. He's looking in a different area. The reason why we haven't found a lot of cures, or mainstream science hasn't found a lot of cures to all these diseases, is because they're looking in the wrong places, But yeah, they're too proud to admit that they've been doing that and taking money for however how long, that they'd rather just keep pushing people in the wrong direction to save their egos. It's sick. It's a crime against humanity.
Back to what your question was, when this person gave you a hard time about questioning the science. Like, well, why would you even question, these scientists, or why would you even question that? Because it goes back to what we're talking about. It's because it's the new religion. Because those are the new priests and the new popes and the new preachers, and those are their religious deities. Now, these people who they regard as scientific gods. So you don't question it. You don't question the church. This is the new church. So you don't question it.
You're rich, basically.
Right, you're a witch if you question it. We're going to burn you at the stake. And that's that. We're going to throw you in the water and see if you float, and if you do, you're a witch, so we're going to burn you anyway. And if you don't, you die because you drown. That's what they do. Right?
Exactly.
So one way or the other, you're but then if you drown, we'll at least regard you and remember that you weren't actually a witch. So our bad, we just killed you. But
I want to say something too. I feel like the level of indoctrination has gone so deep that it's like, this guy was also, I was like, you should do your own research. And he was like, well, that's what the scientists are for. I don't need to do my own research. The scientists do the research for me, and then they tell me what to think. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. But it's this, I don't know. I think it's partly control. I think it's partly ego. I think it's partly laziness. That people don't want to, you do have to do the work. And, unfortunately, people really don't do the work until they get sick or somebody they love gets sick. We're talking about, I guess, on the subject of medical issues, right? People don't really do the work until they get sick, or they get sick themselves, and, they're on their last legs. They'll try anything. Then you become really open to things, maybe to certain things that you were before. And a lot of these things, like these natural treatments, quote unquote, so to speak, they're not even harmful. I mean, is it going to kill you to stop taking chemo and juice for a month? It's not going to kill you. It really isn't. Right. But people are like, oh no, that's not science-based medicine. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. It's too much.
Right.
Yeah,
it's true. It is, and right, exactly. And that's the other point too. Is when you're talking about Gerson therapy, there's not a lot of money in Gerson therapy, because you can really do it on your own. Like you're saying, is it going to kill you to juice? No, but I mean, if everybody figured out that they could heal themselves through juicing, you would put the pharmaceutical companies out of business. It would put so much of the medical establishment out of business. The need for as many doctors as we have. If everybody realized that vaccines were unnecessary and that they could just that basically the decline of disease happened a long time before most of these vaccines were invented. And so therefore, most of these diseases that people are being vaccinated against have already been eradicated prior to the invention of them, or they're avoidable, or they're treatable. So there's really no need for them whatsoever. And you can look this up. It's very, very easy to find history. It's even, you can find it on the CDC's own research and their own websites, that so many of these diseases have already been eradicated. They were already gone before the invention of the vaccine. And when we were talking with Liam, he gave us a little bit of the history on Jonas Salk and the polio vaccine. When we interviewed Dr. Rima, she went into it even deeper. She really gave us a good history of it. And so it was gone. It was done with before he invented the vaccine. And it wasn't even a big problem. And to begin with, it was a benign disease that lasted for a few days, like a general cold or a flu. And so what they did when they started vaccinating people was they brought the disease back. And that's what we're seeing happening in Africa, is that they're going in there to eradicate it, but they're only finding incidents of polio in the places that they're vaccinating.
Yeah.
So
Crazy. And
they're causing the problem. So in other words, they don't want you to know that Gerson therapy works. They don't want you to know that juicing and coffee enemas could work, because guess what? You don't need a doctor to do it. You can do it on your own. You are self-sufficient. You can cure yourself. You can heal yourself. We don't want you to grow hemp, because guess what? You can do it in your backyard. It's a weed. It grows easily. It plants in most environments and most climates. So that would mean that you would not need us to give you injections and pills and all this kinds of stuff. So, of course, there's a big cover-up. You know, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just a fact. It's just they don't have the incentive to find cures for these things, because the incentive is in, managing the disease, or that's the money is in managing the disease. So we don't want you to know that you don't need us to do it. And that's why it's so funny, to try and badmouth Gerson when he wasn't looking. I mean, how was he going to make money off of people doing what he did? He wasn't trying to patent a product. He just said, this is how, how could he? Because it was just basically food and enemas. That's it. Cleansing your body and, aggressively cleansing it, detox, and then filling it with a low-protein diet. I mean, and it was because proteins feed cells. They promote cell growth. So you starve proteins for a while. And by feeding it, with organic fruits and vegetables. I mean, back then it was all organic because they weren't using pesticides yet when he first invented all this. And later, now they would amend their protocol to say that you did need it to be organic, and they would also probably amend it to say, I think they've also amended it to include chelation, because they realize that in some cases you do need to go in and remove the toxins because we're exposed to more now. So, and they're more prevalent and harder to get out, and you got to get those things out. So I think that that's what modern Gerson and Charlotte, who has taken over her dad's work and her research has led them to believe. But nevertheless, it's something you can do on your own without a doctor. And then we were talking about trying to get this woman on our show who gave birth in her home.
Yeah.
And she'd given birth in her home without a doctor, and then taken her baby to the hospital after he was born to get a well check, just to make sure that everything was good. And the baby was perfectly healthy, but then they called CPS on him.
Yeah.
And tried to give these people crap and say that they were negligent. But based on what?
Yeah.
Just based on the fact that they didn't need a fucking doctor to do what she could do on her own.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. That's their only crime, is that they didn't need this God. They didn't need an anointed priest to come in and baptize their child into
silver
the world.
nitrate and in their eyes.
Right. I mean, she just did it because that's what come hell or high water, doctor or not, if you're pregnant and it's time to go, that baby's coming out. Okay?
Yeah.
Like you've seen in the movies, they'll do it in, like, the back of the taxi cab. Like, if it's time, it's coming. And so she did it. She didn't like, the doctor experience. It was intrusive, and she felt it wasn't good for her and the baby, and so she just did it on her own. But they want to give them a bunch of shit, even though they have a healthy baby. There was no sign of, where's the negligence? What sign of negligence?
Oh, because
How? How's that
they weren't
possible?
standing in line like everybody else. You know, they weren't, you know, if you don't do what everybody else does, people freak out. I don't know. It's really, like, I've been joking about this the last few episodes, but we really are in 1984. I can't get over it. It's just so, like, it's very mind-blowing and just baffling how people have become so dependent and so conditioned and indoctrinated that, you know, we don't talk to each other. You know, when somebody has a different point of view, the first instinct is to berate them and call them names and not ask them really why they think the way they do and assume that their intentions are bad because they don't match your belief system. And when you get like that it's a religion. It's religion. It really is, you know. And there are people that would, like, they'll have a shit fit that I said that, but it's true. It's true.
Well, just like in the Old Testament, when Liam was talking during the show, you know, he's talking about the Old Testament. There was they had a mean God, you know, who basically didn't treat, you know, the people really very well, and when they got out of line, you know, you could be tested or you could be, you know, sacrificed or whatever. So that's what this religion is now. It's very Old Testament. It's like, because if you think, when we were talking about medical experiments and scientific experiments, these gods, okay, because they're not real scientists, they're basing it on, you know, their faith and their religious belief. But these gods go in and they treat people abhorrently. I mean, your Dr. Jonas Salk, who was the inventor of the polio vaccine, and we talk about how that's just shit and crap. Mm-hmm. He also spent most of his life, toward the end of his life, researching and trying to find an HIV vaccine, which he never could find because HIV doesn't exist. But he, this was I'm looking at a list here of medical experiments since you brought it up. I meant
to go back to that. Are you looking at the National News article?
Well, I actually found another one on NBC News. So this is a mainstream article, and it said that there was a federally funded study in 1942 injected experimental flu vaccine in male patients at the state insane asylum in Michigan, then exposed them to flu several months later. It was co-authored by Jonas Salk, who a decade later would become famous for the polio vaccine. Some of the men weren't able to describe their symptoms, raising serious questions about how well they understood what was being done to them. Well, of course, there are mental patients in them. So this is not the same as the one that you were talking about with the syphilis injection. But it's... Well,
I mean, the list goes on and on. It's just that, you know, it's... people that are subject to being experimented on are orphans, people in their military, prisoners,
right,
and mental patients, maybe homeless people. And for the orphans and the mental patient, well, the orphans, you know, they don't have families, so nobody's gonna really, you know, stand up for them. For mental people, you know, people are really very ignorant of I said mental patients. People are very, you know, ignorant of a lot of mental illnesses, and, you know, when they put people in institutions, they're putting there, then they're thinking that they're going to do, you know, they're doing a good thing, or that they're going to be taken care of. But a lot of these times, these people are tortured and experimented on. You know, including today. Like, you can go back and you can look at you can look at you and Cameron, and you can look at, you know, some of the psychiatrists and things that they did with all the lobotomies that they performed. But even today, like, I have a friend he worked in a mental institution. He was talking about, now it's not physical. They don't tie them down and give them electric shock therapy, but they give them all these pharmaceutical drugs, which over time makes them more psychotic. He said from his observation that he thought, and my observation as a teacher, I think I told you a couple stories on the air where we had some kids that were medicated, and through the years, you know, I really thought that these kids got worse and more psychotic instead of better. And that's a form of torture. Maybe they're not dying, but they're being tortured. They're being manipulated. They're being fucked with, you know.
Right.
Same thing you can say about religion, if you want to, you know, but people like to say that about religion, but science is doing the same thing. Now, we need, you know, science is good, like, again, I'm not bashing science, but you know, when you talk about science, people have different, like we talk about different consensus on certain subjects. And then you talk about like psychiatry, you go back in psychiatry, that's supposed to people think is a science, but it's all subjective. You know, they vote on all of the disorders in the DSM. There's no test you can take, that physical test like a blood test or a urine sample, whatever, that you can take to determine. There's no objectivity, it's all subjective.
Right.
You know, and you can go to different psychiatrists and get different diagnoses, you know, for different things depending on the psychiatrist and the time of day. I mean, it's terrible. And then you get subjected to these drugs that can, you know, maybe for some people it might help them a little bit for a while, but I've never seen anybody on those drugs long term that, like, you know, it's never been a good thing, ultimately.
Mm-hmm. When we had Gwen Olson on our show,
oh, yeah.
And Gwen Olson wrote the book called Confessions of an RX Drug Pusher, and she was a pharmaceutical rep. She would go to doctors' offices and push certain drugs that they were supposed to use, and she was on them herself, and she talked a little bit about this, how she had just bizarre, crazy thoughts, like suicidal thoughts, and you know, but her mind was very irrational. You guys can go back and listen to the interview we did, but
and read her book too. It's a really good book
as well. Yeah. It's really, really good, and you know, just look up Gwen Olson. You can find out all kinds of stuff about her on YouTube and everywhere else. And she's accessible. She's on Facebook and whatnot. But it's, I mean, she had very irrational thoughts. She described it really well. It was like her reasoning for not wanting to kill herself had something to do with because her husband would be mad that she left the stove on or something strange like that. It was just a really bizarre kind of, you know, she came out of it, I think, because the death of her niece. Her niece had actually killed herself by setting herself on fire under the influence of these drugs. And once she saw that happen and she saw this reaction, it sort of snapped her out of her own drug-induced fog and made her really recognize what was going on. But as you were saying before, you know, sometimes it does take a really serious occurrence like that to get people to truly wake up. I mean, she was aware. She knew these things were causing problems, but they were still kind of going along with it until that happened, and then it became more.
I don't think she was she realized how it could affect her. You know?
Exactly.
That's what people have to realize. I think honestly, to really kind of become aware or awake. Whatever, you know, they have to realize how it could affect them, because, you know, I hear people also making comments about warring and bombing other countries, and, oh, that's okay because we need oil, and what else are we supposed to do, which is sick, but, you know, but I think, you know, they're just really detached because they haven't been bombed. You know, once they get bombed, or they're in a situation where they're, you know, where they're compromised, then, you know, then maybe they will understand, you know. But going back, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, so going back, we keep trying to talk about this. We keep going on topic. So vaccines and medical experiments on children, minorities, women, and inmates, 1845 to 2007 is a really good article that's in the Natural News if you want to get some more info. Just an introduction. I mean, he cites some experiments that have been done, and then you can look deeper into them. But, you know, all of these are done in the name of science, and these are terrible, like, I mean, just abominable things that
and I think that
people have done to other humans, you know.
Right. Okay. I think that this one here that he cites from 2005 was the research that Liam did. I'm not certain, and Liam's not here, so I can't verify that with him, but Liam, who we just had on, Liam Sheff, our friend, he got into investigative journalism through an article that he had written called The House That Built AIDS. And this was about a New York City orphanage that was run by nuns, where they were taking these children, most of them Dominican, most of them, you know, from another country, had been orphaned or had been you know, they're taken away from their parents because their parents were illegals or whatever. And so they came up HIV positive, which he explained a little bit about the test. The test is shit. Okay, the HIV virus is shit. So these kids who were orphaned were coming up HIV positive. So they used him for drug experiments. They were using. They wanted to test, I believe it was AZT, which is essentially a relabeled chemotherapy drug. So it's a cancer drug. And it destroys the immune system. Most of the kids got very, very sick. Many of them died. And so in this article, you can, I think it touches on it. It's in Natural News. It says, in 2005, in response to the BBC documentary and article, Guinea Pig Kids, the New York City Administration of Children's Services, ACS, sends out an April 22nd press release admitting that foster care children were used in experimental AIDS drug trials, but says that the last trial took place in 2001, and thus the trials are not continuing, as BBC reporter Jamie Doran claims. The ACS gives the extent and statistics of experimental drug trials based on its own records and contracts the Vera Institute of Justice to conduct an independent review of the policy and practice and the enrollment of HIV-positive children in foster care in clinical drug trials during the late 1980s and 1990s. And I think what Liam went on to discover was that this had not ended, that they, in 2001, that they were continuing to do it. So this article that he wrote, I think he just came up on his 10-year anniversary. So he wrote it in about 2003, 2004. So maybe this is when they admitted it, was in 2005. But they were still continuing it into the early 2000s, at least, if not still today. I mean, it's very well known that, you know, these child trafficking organizations that are run through CPS, Child Protective Services, removing children from the home or picking up foster children and orphan children, et cetera, are often sold into pharmaceutical companies as drug experimentation. And not only that, I mean, they earn more money. The institute itself earns money every time they put children on medication. So you better believe that about 85 to 90% of children under the care of CPS that have been removed from their home are on pharmaceutical drugs. But not only that, they're being experimented on. And it was just recently, I want to say just like a week ago, I came across this article that was written in the Daily UK, and it was about hundreds of children in an Irish orphanage. This was happening in Ireland. This is happening all over the world, all over the Western world anyway, and most of the Third World as well. That's just, you know, but it's being conducted by people in the Western world. That they took these Irish babies, and there were 800 children. They were in an orphanage, around 800 of them, and using them for vaccine experimentation. And many of them died during the trials. Many of them got sick, and so on and so forth. So this is nothing new. This has been going on a long time. There's also an article I'm citing called Ugly Past of U.S. Human Experiments Uncovered, test including exposing mental patients, prisoners to infectious diseases. This was in NBC News. This is mainstream. There's no secret. It's just something that people don't talk about, and this isn't something that people who believe in the religion of science like you to bring up, because what they're doing is a form of ritualistic human sacrifice. Yeah. It's like, you know, everybody in the truth movement knows about Bohemian Grove. Those guys at least take a fake baby. Okay, these scientists are using real babies.
so we're told it's a fake baby.
Oh, who knows what's going on over there? But I mean, everybody knows that they do weird, creepy rituals. But this is the same thing. It's just that it's been called science, but it's not really science. And that's where you keep bringing up it's the joke that we're in 1984 now, and that's why we are in 1984, because this isn't actual science. This isn't based on any kind of data or research or you know, even anecdotal information. This is just based on religion. They just have a faith. They want to find something. You know, they get commissioned by a pharmaceutical company. Find a virus that causes cancer. So what was his name? Gallo. Robert Gallo. Find a virus that causes cancer. So what does he do?
Oh, HIV.
Well,
that was HIV.
He found HIV, but
HIV,
that's
right. After that, they wanted him to find a cancer virus, right?
So they found. Well, I mean, that's what he was looking for when he so-called found HIV. But he was also, but it was I guess like an offshoot of what he had found, which was HPV, which was the human papillomavirus, causes genital warts. It's a sexually transmitted disease. It supposedly has effects up to numbers of about 85% of the population at any given time, because you can clear it on your own, so you may not ever know that you may have it and never know you have it. But this is the basis for the Gardasil vaccine. This is the basis for
which has devastated many lives. That you can talk about the Gardasil vaccine too, and we have a friend that's been personally affected by it. But yeah, I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, so my point is that what they're calling science is shit. So when we say that science is a religion, we're not meaning that actual science is a religion. We're meaning what these people, what modern science has become, is based on religion. It's not based on actual science. What these people are calling science
yeah,
is not actual science. It's actually religion, because it's faith-based, and it's something that pharmaceutical companies are commissioning people like Robert Gallo, like these self-serving pricks who want to go in and just be famous and have their name in lights. They're not gods,
like
mythical creatures or deities. They're assholes. Okay.
But too, another argument that people talk about is, scientists would never do anything that's morally incorrect. And you look at somebody that's like Paul Offit, who's very outspoken in the I guess on the pro-vaccine side, but yet he's a patent holder for the rotavirus vaccine. So wouldn't common sense tell you that he has invested interest in in vaccination, since he's invented a vaccine that he's making money off of? But how should he even be allowed to do that? That's a total conflict of interest, Right. But people don't want you to bring that up, They don't talk about things like that, And getting back to what you were saying about, we were talking about earlier about polio and or these third world countries that are not getting polio, these countries that are getting vaccinated, and there's like this belief that everybody in the third world, they're dirty, they're incompetent, they're feeble-minded. But yet, first of all, they're not taking into account that a lot of people are going with industry and messing up their water supply and messing up their soil and, corrupting polluting their environment. And then that's, one reason that a lot of them are coming up with these diseases or vaccination. But if you're really into science and you're really going to look at all the information and be fair, why are you leaving all these other factors out?
Right.
And why are you leaving out the fact that, there are people that would say, well, aren't you scared if you go to, like, Mexico? Somebody told me this, I'm like, aren't you scared if you go to Mexico and, what if you go to Mexico and then you bring back some disease to the U.S.? I'm like, yeah, like the thousands of immigrants that come in each year unvaccinated? Really? The ones that are in the food industry, that, is they're basically the backbone of the restaurant food service industry are people that are undocumented aliens,
right.
and people that are nannies that watch your baby while you're working your 65-hour-a-week work job. They're unvaccinated. You would think that people would use common sense and think about these things. So if these people are so contaminated, so to speak, would something would have happened by now? How would me not visiting a country and not getting vaccinated and bringing back, coming back to the country, how would I bring back a plague? This by myself, how would that bring down America? This is not common sense. That's just as mystical as saying that, if you don't get vaccinated, you're putting the people that are unvaccinated in danger. Do you believe in the Easter Bunny too? Because that's just as crazy. Why are you getting vaccinated if you're not? Why are you getting vaccinated? Aren't you getting vaccinated to protect yourself? So if you're vaccinated and I'm unvaccinated, how is that a threat to you? That's the stupidest shit I've ever heard. Like this last case of the measles that they're trying to scare everybody about. It's like there like 20 people. It was like 20 people that had it. 2 were unvaccinated, and 18 were vaccinated. Right. But yet, I guess the 2 that were unvaccinated supposedly put them in danger. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
That's just, I can't get over that people are, like, falling for that. There's some people that are like, well, everybody has to be, and plus there are people that have autoimmune disorders, and it's known that they can't get vaccinated, but they can still carry diseases and get diseases, so it's impossible to vaccinate everybody. It's this crazy control issue that people have. It's just, I don't know, man.
And it's funny because it seems like it comes. Liam was talking about it, and the liberal left seem to be more into it than the right do. It's just another divide thing. Like it's you have the one side, the conservatives that believe in religion and this is all a sin and so on and so forth, and then you have the other side that anything goes, but you have to be vaccinated for it, or we have to, and then you can just have free sex as long as we give you an STD vaccine or whatever, and we all have to conform and do exactly the same, and otherwise you're putting everybody at risk. So I almost think it's like I don't know how to describe it, but it's a reverse like racism, or in the case like what you were talking about, how people view the third world as dirty and like oversexed. It's usually the fake liberals that sit there and go, oh, well, we need to protect those dirty savages from themselves. Those are the people. I mean, but who come off and well, we want to protect everybody's civil rights, and we want everybody to have equality and this and that. But really, they're a bunch of fucking racists. Because they sit there and they look down on these people, and they need protection, and it doesn't matter what they want, because the people of Africa and the people of these countries, of India, are and Pakistan, by the way, which the parents, this came out recently, the parents of these Pakistani children who they were giving vaccines to thought that the vaccines were causing their children to become sterile, so they started killing healthcare workers. Okay? So, I mean, so they started doing that, and then the CIA had to admit that they were putting out false vaccine programs to spy on terrorists. So, whatever, like, who knows what the hell was going on over there? Are they really sterilizing these people, or but they admitted that they're using fake vaccine programs. So are they fake because they're not really vaccinating, they're actually just sterilizing them? Well, or are they fake because they're just using placebos because they're really just trying to use this as a spy technique? Who knows? Yeah. It's crazy. Well, we can't. Go ahead.
No, that was the Philippines. They found out right before they had that what did they have, a typhoon or a hurricane or tsunami? I don't know. I don't know which was which. They had a huge storm right before that. Okay, that was exposed that they were putting sterilants in the vaccines. That somebody found out. I think it was like another doctor. Somebody found out that there was this element that they were putting in the vaccines, which had nothing to do with whatever components they were using to vaccinate the people for. But they found this random component that caused sterilization in these vaccines. So, I mean, I look at people like Bill Gates and I talk about how I hate him. I really view him as a high-class, very sophisticated racist. And I think when people think about racists, they think of skinheads or Klan members. Exactly. And you know what? And just to be fair,
or the Christian right,
black people can be racist too. Black people can be racist. I don't also want to imply that I'm talking about all white people. I mean, not everybody can be racist, okay? But I'm bringing up Bill Gates, and I'm talking about in this instance the white side of racism, because they're the ones in power. The people that are in power at this moment in these eugenic circles just happen to be white, and they're using their power and money to basically slow kill and genocide and sterilize these. Well, sterilizing is, I guess, genocide, because then they can't procreate. So genocide these people, and it's very interesting because like all of the listeners of the show are aware of all of the technology that it's out there, like and how well hemp could be for how good hemp can be for our economy. So why aren't they investing in things like that? There's this inventor named Dean Kamen who invented this amazing, I can't think of the name of the machine. It's called I can't think of it. He invented this amazing machine, and basically, which can take sewer water and distill it and take all of the impurities out. You can take a can of Coke. I saw them pour a can of Coke, a Coca-Cola can, into the machine, and the water would come out the end completely purified. You know, and that's something that could be built on a larger scale for in places like, you know, that have contaminated water, but yet, you know, Bill Gates is investing in vaccines. You know,
right.
you would think that he would be investing, and people like Warren Buffett, and would be investing in hempcrete, or, you know, water purification systems, or, you know, there's technology now, not technology, I don't know what I would call it, I don't know if it's considered technology, but there's a way now that people have figured out to remineralize soil. Why isn't he investing in things like that? And why does he have 500 shares of Monsanto? You know, so because people are also, you know, it's funny too. I look at the people that are so-called intellectual, and they want to think that they're intellectual. They're like, oh well, we don't idolize people like Kim Kardashian, and which isn't cool either. I mean, that's another show. But yeah, they idolize people like Bill Gates. And, you know, and when you bring these things up, there's nothing they can do wrong. Even if you show them, you're like, oh, look, here is the proof on the security stock exchange that he owns 500 shares of Monsanto. Oh, well, there must be a reason. Yeah, he's a fucking psycho-crazy eugenicist. That's the reason. You know? How is that? But you know, you pardon these people because you made them gods. You know, you listen to Al Gore and you let him tell you that it's okay that other lives matter less, you know, because there are too many people on the planet, so somebody has to die. But, you know, he's not even a meteorologist, but that's okay, because he made this really cool propagandic movie that you know, that gained a lot of popularity.
Which, by the way, is boring as hell.
It really was.
Ugh. And it's also, and speaking of another, like, you know, someone who we've put up on a pedestal almost as a god, it was also a commercial for Apple computers. You know, we talked about in a previous show, Stephen Jobs, and I don't know the truth about it because I've only seen the fictional or the movie that was based on his life, starring Ashton Kutcher, and it was a dramatization. But based on that, you know, I mean, again, it's like what Liam was saying about Charles Darwin. I mean, even most of Charles Darwin's theories were not his own. And, you know, so these guys, it's just like Stephen Jobs, most of his computers were not his own.
I mean, all of them were. Well, okay, according to the movie, of course.
According to the movie, the software...
We got to be fair, because we don't...
Right.
You know, but...
Exactly. Just to be fair.
He stole it from his friend. Well, he collaborated with his friend. His friend invented the technology, but he was really ambitious. He was very good at marketing. Exactly. And then in the movie, they implied that Bill Gates stole the technology from them. So, I mean, come on, man. Like, how often does this go on? How often do you... And plus, you know, even if you do invent something, you know, doesn't mean that you're a benevolent person. I think that's what people get intelligence and benevolence confused.
Exactly.
You know, if you're not intelligent by society standards, then you're a heathen, you're an idiot, you're not really worthy of life. You know, but if you're a genius, you can basically do what the fuck you want. You can rape children, you can, you know, genocide people, you could hold ritualistic ceremonies, you can do whatever you want. You know, it's cool because you invented cool technology, so you're pardoned. You know, or we think that you invented cool technology, so it's okay.
Yeah. It's true. I know, like, where were all the people that were, you know, sad about when Stephen Jobs died, about the, you know, the sweatshops and the basically slave labor that he uses to create, that his company uses to create their iPads and their iPods and their technology. You know, and I mean, this appeared on The Daily Show, their own religious belief. Their fake liberals love that show. And it appeared on The Daily Show that this was going on, and yet, you know, then they all act like, you know, he was some contributor to society by creating this stuff, which he didn't really create, and he just marketed it, and then used, you know, sacrificed bits of humanity to make it, because a lot of these people, you know, commit suicide. They had to build nets to stop the suicides from happening, either because they were exposed to chemical. We don't really know why. I mean, it was just their lives were so horrible that they wanted to kill themselves, or they were exposed to chemicals that they were using in the production. So who knows? But the point is that modern science is not what people think it is. It's a religion, and that's what our show has been about today. So we're out of time here, so we're going to go ahead and close it out. But we want to thank Liam Sheff, our friend Liam Skeef, the conspiracy realist, for being on our show today. As always, he's great, and we highly recommend his book, The Official Stories, which you can find at our website, truthertalk.com. You can check out Liam's website at liamsheff.com. So until next time, peace, truth, and love, y'all.
Peace, truth, and love, you guys. Bye-bye.